Chapter 16, we're still in the story of the English Civil War, picking up with Section D, Puritanical Absolutism in England, Cromwell and the Protectorate. So in the last section we heard all about the changes in England and the conflict between English Parliament and the English kings. This is all the story of the birth of constitutional government in England. It's long and painful, 80 years with a civil war in the middle. So the King of England was killed, Charles I, in the Civil War. He's out. The Cavaliers, the Roundheads win, Cavaliers are out. And now you enter and here's the Cromwell. He actually went and visited the dead Charles I after they sewed his head back on, put him in a coffin, buried him in a nice place, and Cromwell was there kind of like, I won, look at me. So Oliver Cromwell was the leader, the military leader, of course, of the Parliament's army, the Roundheads, and now he's basically the only one in charge. So you enter this period known as the interregnum, means between the kings. There is no king of England for 11 years because they killed him, and they don't bring in another one, and instead it's Cromwell, the interregnum, for 11 years. Got it? All right. And Cromwell is going to rule as a Puritan military dictator. Cromwell is an ugly man. He's described physically as having warts and an ugly face, and this is about as beautiful as they could have ever painted him. So he's this really great, brilliant general that people kind of, sometimes you end up with worse. You have this civil war, you hope for better, you end up with worse. That's kind of what happens here with Oliver Cromwell. He ruled as a religious dictator because he was a Puritan as part of that, Puritan majority in the Parliament. So in this whole period of time, a famous, important book that you all are going to read a bit of was written by an author named Thomas Hobbes. And he had seen all of the chaos of the English Civil War over the last, 20, 30 years, this horrible conflict between king and parliament. And Thomas Hobbes' book is The Leviathan, and it's a political theory. He goes, look at all the chaos that's been created here as we're battling out parliament king. The best thing, the best form of government is a strong monarch. That keeps the peace. A strong monarch and a strong church, but not a strong parliament, because there's inherently conflict between parliament and kings. So we really, to preserve all of our security, our lives, our well-being, we've got to go with king. So the book Leviathan becomes known as a defense, really, of absolute monarchy. It's one of the most famous ones of all time. In this book, he talks about the state of nature. This should ring a few bells for you. And this is like life without government. When we don't have government, our life is constantly at risk from being taken from us by someone else. Our property is at risk. Every man is against every man, and our life is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. This is what happens when it's just people without any form of government. He kind of goes back to life in this fictional state to prove his point. So the best way we can deal with this is a strong monarch that we consent to through some kind of social contract, that then we give up a lot of our individual rights, but then that strong monarch protects us. This is the whole theory of the Leviathan. He named the Leviathan after this mythical sea monster that's this really powerful creature of mythology. But this picture is the cover of his book, and there's that strong king with sword and scepter, the two emblems of royal authority. And on the left are the political symbols, castle. You see all that. On the right are religious symbols. You need both of these things strong, but you notice there's no parliament in a big meeting in here. This is not how it works. So Hobbes is always going to be put up against John Locke, which we'll get to in a minute. Hobbes and Locke, opposite theories politically, very important guys. So the monarchy back to the story here, the monarchy under Cromwell was abolished, okay? And a commonwealth or republic, another word of saying commonwealth is republic, was proclaimed. But in reality, Oliver Cromwell is going to rule as a military dictator. Oliver Cromwell passed what was called the Instrument of Government, which was a constitution, a new one for England, a written one, and Cromwell was declared Lord Protector over this new commonwealth. But in reality, again, his generals and he ruled the country of England. And very rapidly, he ripped up the instrument of government and said, yeah, that doesn't work. I don't have enough power to get the job done. So he tore up the instrument of government, and now he's ruling England fully as a dictator within just months or a few months or years. They passed religious toleration in England, except for Catholics. So that's the one. Remember, Puritans hate Catholics. You can be what you want, but you can't be a Catholic. So that's, I guess, something positive that happened under Cromwell. They finally crushed the Scottish rebellion that was underway. They crushed the Irish rebellion brutally, to the point that the Irish will just absolutely cringe at the name of Oliver Cromwell to this day, because it was put down with just incredible brutality. Now, because this is a Puritan dictatorship, Puritans are all about morality and strict moral values. Remember that? Going back into John Calvin's Geneva. So they start to censor all these things in England and put limits on what's going on. The press is censored. They close all the theaters in London because the theaters are too liberal and too, scandalous and provocative. They stopped organized sports because they said people are, putting sports and theater above religion, above their faith. These are idols. These are things that are getting in the way. So they really radically changed English society just for these 11 years. And they canceled holidays that they thought were distracting, like they got rid of Christmas. They said that's too secular. It's too Catholic. It was created for St. Nicholas. Remember this? So that's too Catholic. And even Christmas is, we got to get rid of that. It's an idol. We need to just focus on our pure Puritan Christian faith. So they do really incredibly, dramatic things in English society here under Oliver Cromwell. All right. And then, I guess even back to the religious tolerance thing, they actually welcomed back the Jews, who had also, like everywhere, been expelled from England at one point, and the Jews are happily to have a country to live in. So there's some religious tolerance in England, but there's a lot of social control over what everybody does. That's the story of Oliver Cromwell. He died in 1658. His son was maybe going to take over. That's what he wanted. So 2 years of more chaos. So what are we going to do in England now that Cromwell is dead? The remaining members of Parliament that were there were so mad at the new direction of the country and this new Puritan dictatorship that when they voted to bring back the Stuarts. So they experimented with this Puritan democracy for 11 years, decided it was no good. And here we go again, another twist. We're going to bring back the Stuarts. And it's called the Restoration. The Restoration. Here we go. The Stuarts Part 2. The monarchy was restored. They go, we need a king. I guess some of them have read some Hobbes at this point. And they go, we need a king, not an absolute monarch. We want a constitutional monarch, someone that will work with us in Parliament. And they came up with Charles II. This is the son of the guy who got his head cut off. This is Charles I's son. So it goes James I, Charles I. Then we're going to have Charles II. I may have misspoke there a minute ago. So James, Charles, James. That's the order of events here. James, Charles, James. And then we're going to get William and Mary at the end. The Stuarts, Charles II, the son of Charles I, the dead king. They bring him back. He had been in exile in France for a while, and he goes, all right, I'll take the throne. And this guy's going to come back, and he is known as the Merry Monarch, M-E-R-R-Y, the Happy King. He's going to get rid of all the rules that Cromwell put into place. So he brings back the theater, brings back sports, brings back dancing, brings back drinking, partying. They call him the king that brought back partying. And initially, he's going to be great. Everybody in England's like, yay, we get our culture back, essentially. And he agreed to be a limited monarch. Charles II said, I won't be absolute, I'll be limited, I'll work with Parliament. Okay, but that's all going to break down. It's not going to work. The problems of religion and sovereignty remained, and disputes over the two, as well as taxes. So he makes all these promises, ends up being not so hot. Look at him there. He's described as relaxed, sensual, and indifferent. And he looks like that, kind of an old guy. Again, the king who brought back partying. All right, but Parliament is really serious now. They want their power back. They want authority. They wanted really religious uniformity too. We don't want any more of this trouble about people maybe looking like Catholics. So they passed the Test Act. The Test Act said that basically you have to be a member of the Church of England, Anglican, to be of any importance in order to, you get to vote, in order to hold office, public office, in order to be a minister or a preacher, in order to teach, be a professor, or go to college at all. You have to be a member of the Church of England. This is the test. You have to pass this test in order to have any important job in the nation. Yeah, Parliament is trying to get back some authority here, and they're kind of done with the Puritan deal too. Have you noticed? The Puritans are, that was a great experiment, but it failed. They're out. So now we want to just be Anglican, that middle ground. So this is what the Parliament's doing. The Parliament wants and gets this thing passed called the Cabal put into action, CABAL. It's 5 advisors that get sent to the king from the Parliament. So this is like the king's cabinet, his advisors, but they have to be members of Parliament. So he can pick 5 of them, but they got to be, so it's about shared power. We're going to share authority between king and Parliament. You're going to have this cabal of people, but they are members of Parliament. You can't just do whatever you want with your own advisors. The word cabal comes from the first 5 letters, or the letters of the first 5 guys, their last names were CABAL, and so they put that together and made up a new word called the cabal, and those are the advisors. The second thing that's going to be about shared power is this concept of ministerial responsibility. The king's officials, all the king's ministers, not religious, but political officials, everyone that's running the government in the executive branch, have to answer to Parliament. They're responsible to Parliament. These are new things. This sounds like we're on the road toward constitutionalism. Sounds sort of like what we're doing in America later on, and it's a good first step, but there's going to be trouble. Okay, that's okay. It lasts for about 10, 15, 20 years or so. But then, over time, there's still issues with finances. Conflicts emerge between Charles II and the Parliament over money, and they simply weren't funding him with enough money to run the government the way he wanted to. So what he did is his downfall. He went to Louis XIV, King of France, absolute monarch, the Sun King. He went to him secretly and said, look, I can't get enough money out of my parliament to run my country. You give me some cash, and I promise over time that I will convert to Catholicism and reinstall Catholicism in England. And this is a really treasonous deal here. This sounds like what his father was all about. Got him killed. This is all done in secret. So Louis XIV goes, yep, I like Catholicism. I want to control England maybe. So he loans him all this money with these promises that he will become a Catholic someday. Someday. And I'll loosen up the rules on Catholics. Nobody knew about this. Okay? Until later. All of a sudden, this was outed and revealed. Members of Parliament heard about this, and they freak out. Anti-Catholic fear spread everywhere. Charles II had no heir. Lots of mistresses, lots of illegitimate kids, but no legal heir. And so he dies without child, okay? And in replacing him is his brother, still the Stuarts. This is now James II. He is even worse than Charles II. He is a Church of England member, but he's really he's openly Catholic. He's not even faking it. He says he's in the Church of England, but he's not. He's a Catholic. And so this is a real problem now. So Parliament quickly rallies and passes this thing called the Exclusion Bill, which denies the throne to any Catholic. Okay, he says, no, you got to be in the Church of England. But the bill never became law. It was never in place. This all happens really rapidly. James II is only king, as you can see, for 3 years. So there's a lot of chaos here. So James II did indeed succeed his brother on the throne. You now have an open Catholic on the throne of England. Oh my goodness, we've come full circle. And James II violated the Test Act, which was the only thing Parliament had going for them. They appointed Catholics to lots of important positions. All the advisors, all the university professors. England it looked like we're headed toward another civil war. Okay, it's not good. James II looks like he's been wearing sunglasses outside, and he's got some, raccoon-looking face here. Anyway, he's an interesting guy, but he's a Catholic. Okay. All right, what's worse is that James II did have a son. A baby boy is born to him, and now you've got a Catholic dynasty in the making. And there is a success, he will be succeeded by a Catholic son, and he is reproducing like crazy here. And now a Catholic dynasty is certain to be in the future here. So instead of another civil war, Parliament had learned their lesson. They made a secret deal. Lots of secret deals here. Parliament, emissaries from Parliament, went over to Holland, to the Netherlands, secretly, and said, "We have got trouble in England. We want the daughter of James I, whose name was Mary, who's a Protestant, and who had been sent off to marry this guy named William, the king of the Dutch, or one of the stadtholders, really. He's a figurehead king of the Netherlands. They're Protestant. So instead of taking the boy that's born as a Catholic, we want the daughter instead, who's a grown-up. Give us James's daughter, Mary, to be Queen of England, and we'll replace James II on the throne of England." This is all done, in secret. And William and Mary accepted the offer, and they agreed to come to England to be king and queen of England together. And they sailed over to England, they landed on the shores of England. The Parliament had raised up this little, little side army and went to meet them, and they were going to escort them, and we're setting up for another civil war here, a showdown. But James II saw the handwriting on the wall and said, "I'm out. I'm going to flee. I'm not going to fight." He fled to France, he abdicated, and he went and lived with Louis XIV, who protected him for the rest of his life. So like his brother, he was buddies with Louis XIV of France, and they avoid incredible civil war. Okay, this is huge. This is called the Glorious Revolution. There's William III, and there's Mary II, William and Mary. They come from Holland to England to be the new king and queen of England. It's called the Glorious Revolution because it was bloodless. Okay, it was wonderful, it was peaceful, there was no civil war. These guys agree to be monarchs together. They call them joint monarchs. They're going to be both king and queen at the same time because she's the rightful heir. But we don't really want a woman monarch, so we're going to have them together. So this is the end of divine right in England. No more. No more absolutism in England ever. Okay, these guys agree to share sovereignty between king and parliament, between monarchs and parliament forever. And William and Mary issued a Bill of Rights in 1689. You got to know the year 1688. That's the Glorious Revolution. That's the change between James II and William and Mary. This is huge. And now you have a constitutional monarchy created in England. Laws are made by the Parliament. But Parliament, that's it. Parliament must be called into session at least once every 3 years. The Triennial Act is made permanent. There will be free elections and free debate in Parliament. Our judges in England will serve for life, which means they'll be independent and not controlled by politicians, and they can't get thrown out if they're unpopular, if they make decisions we don't like. There will not be any standing armies in England anymore. That got us into trouble. Protestants will be able to bear arms forever and hold weapons. The monarch of England must always be Protestant. Church of England Protestant from this point forward. So this is the English Bill of Rights and the new constitutional monarchy under William and Mary. John Locke comes along and says, yes, this is how it works. The second treatise is civil government. He writes the opposing theory to Hobbes. It says this is all about natural rights. Our government, just like what William and Mary are doing, are all about protecting us, our natural rights, which are life, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and property. So he sees the English Civil War, he sees the chaos, and he goes, this other direction is the way to go. And when your government commits tyranny against you, you have the right to rebel. Absolutely, it's one of your natural rights. If your government oppresses you, you can change it out. Look what we just did. We switched out an oppressive regime, the Stuarts, Charles II, James II, and we brought in better government. That's okay. Economic freedom, in John Locke's mind, is linked to political freedom. So we have to have political freedom in order to make money and be safe, and constitutionalism is the way to go. We want representatives in our government, but we don't want everybody voting. So John Locke says we need a limited franchise. Only men of property should vote. Franchise is the right to vote. We don't want peasants and commoners voting. Just men of property, people with a stake in society, people who actually, are vested and committed to our way of life. So he doesn't call for democracy, make no mistake, okay? But he says we need to be people voting, have some sort of representation, the right to rebel, protect life, liberty, and property, have a strong parliament. This is all good stuff. His ideas are especially popular in colonial America, which is now underway, and our colonists are going to use these ideas of John Locke a generation later to get rid of England. So amazingly, the ideas of England are going to get used to get rid of England. But that's for U.S. history, okay? Not a democratic revolution. This is not about people voting. This is about Parliament ruling. Parliament represents essentially the rich. That's okay. Most people in England have no say in their government, but it's better than it was under James and Charles and all these other guys going back to absolutism. Now, new forms of government that move toward constitutionalism, we have a cabinet system where the members of Parliament are now the chief advisors to the king. This is the king's cabinet. His advisors have to come from Parliament. The policymakers are not these side guys. They're from Parliament. They're elected. And the chief policymaker of England is going to become known as the Prime Minister. The head of government is now the Prime Minister, who's a member of Parliament. This is kind of like the president in England, except it comes from Parliament. So there's a king, and now there's Parliament, and there's a Prime Minister that has to work with the king from this point forward to make policy. No more absolutism in England. It's moving in the long scope of human history, moving toward representative government. This is the most advanced government in Europe at the time, the result of the Glorious Revolution, William of Orange, the Bill of Rights. It's a big win, and the great thing is that there wasn't a second civil war. So there, we'll stop from here, and the next time we come back, we'll do the story of the Dutch, which is our third form of government, and a whole different thing altogether.